this episode, we focus on something that sounds simple but is surprisingly difficult in real life. Building a governance forum that can make AI risk decisions instead of endlessly talking around them. Beginners often imagine a forum as a meeting, and they assume the meeting works if people show up and discuss issues. But in governance, the purpose is not discussion for its own sake, and it is not a place to collect opinions without closure. A governance forum exists to decide, and deciding means choosing an action, assigning accountability, setting conditions, and recording the rationale. AI makes this harder because the risks can be technical, legal, ethical, and operational all at once, so people may disagree on what matters most or what counts as acceptable. If a forum does not resolve decisions, risk accumulates, projects drift, and people start bypassing the process because it feels like a slow conversation that never ends. The goal here is to understand what makes a forum decisive, how to keep it fair and informed, and how to avoid common patterns that cause governance to stall. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A governance forum that resolves AI risk decisions starts with a clear reason it exists, which is different from simply gathering stakeholders in the same room. A forum should have a defined decision scope, meaning it is responsible for a specific set of decisions, such as approving high-impact use cases, accepting residual risk, setting required controls, or pausing systems when harm is detected. Scope matters because if everything can be brought to the forum, the agenda becomes unmanageable and decisions become slow. At the same time, if the scope is too narrow, the forum becomes irrelevant and teams make decisions elsewhere without oversight. Beginners can think of scope as the boundary lines on a sports field, because without boundaries, the game becomes chaos. Clear scope also helps people prepare because they know what evidence is expected and what kinds of questions will be asked. When scope is well defined, the forum becomes a predictable decision engine rather than a vague committee. A second requirement is clear authority, because a forum that cannot decide is not truly a governance forum. Authority means the forum has the right to approve, reject, delay, require changes, and escalate issues, and those powers are accepted by the organization. If authority is unclear, meetings end with recommendations that no one is obligated to follow. That is a common failure because it creates the appearance of governance without the reality of governance. Authority also requires decision rights, meaning it is clear who in the forum can make the call when there is disagreement. Some forums decide by a chair, some by consensus, and some by a voting mechanism, but whichever approach is used, it must be explicit. Beginners should notice that decision rights are not about politics. They are about preventing paralysis. When risk is high and time matters, you cannot afford to wait for perfect agreement from every participant. Composition is the next key element, because AI risk decisions require the right mix of perspectives. A forum should include people who understand the system's purpose, the people affected by its outcomes, the legal and policy environment, and the technical realities of how it behaves. If the forum is purely technical, it may undervalue human impact and legal obligations. If it is purely business-driven, it may underestimate technical limitations and security risks. If it is purely compliance-focused, it may miss practical trade-offs that determine whether the system can be operated safely. The right composition depends on the organization, but the principle is consistent. Include roles that can speak for key risk categories and roles that can commit resources to remediation. Another practical composition rule is to avoid overcrowding, because too many participants often turns decision-making into performance rather than problem-solving. A decisive forum is large enough to be informed and balanced, but small enough to be accountable. To make decisions reliably, forums need input standards, meaning the evidence required before a request can be considered. Without input standards, meetings become debates based on personal impressions, and the loudest voice can dominate. Input standards can include a description of intended use, a summary of risks and impacts, evidence of control readiness, and a plan for monitoring and response. Beginners do not need to memorize specific document names. They just need to understand that the forum should require consistent information every time. When requests arrive incomplete, the forum should have a clear rule for what happens, such as deferring the decision until evidence is complete. This protects the forum from being pressured into rushed approvals. It also protects teams by clarifying what good preparation looks like. A forum that makes decisions based on inconsistent or incomplete information creates uneven governance and unpredictable outcomes. Another factor that makes a forum effective is having clear decision outputs, which means every agenda item ends with an outcome that can be acted on. The outcome might be approve with conditions, reject with rationale, or request changes with specific criteria for reconsideration. The key is that the outcome is unambiguous and recorded. Beginners often underestimate how valuable conditions are because conditions turn a risky yes into a controlled yes. For example, a system might be allowed only for internal use, only with certain data sources, only with additional review, or only with increased monitoring. Conditions also assign accountability by naming who must implement them and by when. When conditions are vague, they become optional, so the forum should make them specific enough to verify. Clear outputs prevent the most frustrating pattern in governance, where meetings end with a sense that something was discussed, but no one knows what was decided. A governance forum also needs a way to handle disagreement without becoming stuck, because AI decisions often involve uncertainty. Disagreement can be healthy when it reveals risks that were not considered, but it becomes harmful when it prevents action. One approach is to define escalation rules, meaning when a decision cannot be resolved within the forum, it moves to a higher authority with a clear timeline. Another approach is to define decision principles that guide trade-offs, such as prioritizing safety for high-impact use cases or requiring stronger evidence for systems that affect individuals. Forums can also use structured challenge, where certain roles are expected to question assumptions and request evidence. The point is not to create conflict, but to prevent groupthink. Beginners can think of this as building a habit of asking, what could go wrong and how would we know, before approving something. When disagreement is managed with clear rules, it becomes a source of better decisions rather than a reason for paralysis. Time management is another practical design issue, because a forum that tries to handle everything in one long meeting will either rush decisions or avoid making them. A strong forum design separates routine decisions from high-stakes decisions and provides a path for each. Routine decisions, such as minor updates within an approved scope, can be handled with streamlined review and quick closure. High-stakes decisions, such as approving a new high-impact use case, require deeper review and more time for questions. Some forums also use pre-meeting review, where materials are read in advance and the meeting focuses on resolving issues and deciding. Beginners should notice that decision-making quality depends on preparation, and preparation depends on clear expectations. If participants show up unprepared, meetings become slow and decisions become shallow. Designing the forum means designing the flow of information into the forum, not just the meeting itself. A key pattern that makes forums fail is turning them into status update sessions instead of decision sessions. Status updates may be useful elsewhere, but a governance forum should be ruthless about focusing on decisions. That means the agenda should label which items require a decision, what decision is being requested, and what evidence supports it. It also means the chair or facilitator must protect time for decision items and prevent the meeting from being consumed by side conversations. Beginners might think facilitation is a soft skill, but in governance it is a control because it prevents drift and ensures closure. Another failure pattern is letting decisions be postponed repeatedly without a clear reason, which teaches teams that governance is a place where progress goes to die. A well-designed forum uses deferral only when evidence is incomplete or risks are not understood, and when it defers, it sets clear next steps and timelines. It is also important to design the forum so that it can respond to incidents and emerging risks, not just planned releases. AI systems can behave unexpectedly when data changes, when users find new ways to use them, or when external conditions shift. If the forum only meets on a slow schedule, it may be unable to act when harm appears quickly. That is why forums often need an emergency decision path, which could be a smaller group with delegated authority to pause or constrain systems temporarily. The emergency path should still be accountable, meaning decisions are recorded and reviewed afterward, but it must be fast enough to reduce harm. Beginners can think of this like having a fire drill plan, where you do not debate who is in charge during an emergency. The purpose is to protect people and systems first, then analyze and improve later. A governance forum that cannot act under pressure is not complete. Fairness and consistency are also essential, because if teams perceive the forum as arbitrary or biased, they will avoid it. Consistency comes from applying the same standards and decision criteria across similar systems, and from documenting rationale, so patterns can be reviewed. Fairness comes from making expectations clear and giving teams a predictable way to address concerns. If a forum rejects a proposal, it should explain why in terms of criteria, not personal preference. If it approves with conditions, it should make the conditions verifiable and reasonable relative to risk. Beginners should notice that transparency is part of governance effectiveness, because transparency creates trust. Trust reduces the temptation to bypass the process, and bypassing is one of the biggest threats to AI governance. When forums are transparent and consistent, they become a partner in responsible progress rather than an obstacle. Once the forum is designed, you also need to ensure it produces a decision trail that can be followed later. Decision trails help with accountability, learning, and proof that governance happened. A decision trail should capture what was decided, who decided it, what evidence was considered, what conditions were imposed, and what follow-up is required. Without this, the organization cannot easily answer questions like why a risky system was approved or why a warning was ignored. Decision trails also make it easier for new team members to understand the history and rationale behind current controls. Beginners should see this as a way to reduce repeated debates, because the forum can reference prior decisions and build consistency over time. When decision trails are strong, the forum becomes smarter with experience rather than repeating the same arguments every month. A practical way to summarize effective forum design is to focus on closure, authority, evidence, and accountability. Closure means every decision item ends with a clear outcome and clear next steps. Authority means the forum has recognized power to approve, reject, require conditions, and pause systems, with clear decision rights when disagreement exists. Evidence means requests come with consistent information that allows informed evaluation, and incomplete requests are handled predictably. Accountability means conditions are assigned to specific owners with timelines and verification, and decisions are recorded in a way that supports review. When these elements work together, governance forums actually resolve AI risk decisions rather than delaying them. This is how organizations keep AI adoption from turning into uncontrolled experimentation that later becomes an emergency. The main lesson is that governance forums are not valuable because they exist, but because they produce real decisions that control risk in a consistent, transparent way. Designing such a forum requires defining decision scope, authority, composition, inputs, and outputs so that uncertainty does not turn into paralysis. It also requires building routines for preparation, handling disagreement, and responding quickly when new risks appear. When forums are designed to be decisive and fair, teams are more likely to engage with them honestly, which increases visibility and reduces shadow AI. That visibility makes it easier to assign ownership, maintain controls, and adjust standards as the organization learns. If you can build a forum that reliably answers who decides and what was decided, then you have created a core governance mechanism that turns responsible AI from an intention into an operational reality.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.